Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunamilitan Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaye Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam pravachantam manupeta apeta krityam rapayano viraha katara ajuhava putreti tan maitaya taravo binedus tam sarvabhutam hridayam munimanatosmi Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatam vyasam tato jayamudirayat Bhaktya vihina parada lakshay kiptastika mari tarangamadye kripa mahitam sharanam prapanna vrinde namaste charanara vendam tave vasmi najivami tvaya vina iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayanam charanandike vancha kalpatarubhyascha Kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So, we're going to begin by offering our most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of our beloved Gurus, unto Sri Guru Pada Padma Nityalita Bhavishta, Om Vishnupadasto Tatsat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada, and unto Sri Guru Pada Padma Nityalita Bhavishta, Om Vishnupadasto Tatsat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and unto our exalted Rupanuga Guru Varga, all assembled Vaishnavas Vaishnavis. So, all week long we've been reading about the glories of Srimati Radhika, and specifically hearing about her transcendental identity and qualities, to disabuse ourselves of any mundane conceptions we might hold about the supreme masculine identity and the supreme feminine identity, and the duality and non-duality of Radha and Krishna. Because we are conditioned by the relationships in this world, sometimes the relationships in this world, there's often inequalities, and people rebel against the idea of someone who's a predominator over someone who's predominated. Right? But when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada uses these words, he's using them to define the roles of the supreme spiritual energy and the supreme, object of service. And one is masculine, one is feminine, but he's made very clear that actually they are two halves of the same absolute truth. And so there's no question of one greater than the other, one role being greater than the other. In fact, they are competing with one another on the plane of pure love to give pleasure to the other. But he's presenting this in this extraordinarily clear philosophical way. And also he's explaining that our identity as jivas, we are part of the feminine quality, because we're Shakti. There's Shakti and Shaktiman. Krishna is Shaktiman, and Radhika is the complete Sarup Shakti. That means from her, all the spiritual existence is, we say it comes into effect, it's eternal, but we have a language which doesn't permit us to understand eternal reality. So we use these terms to make it a little more accessible to us. But from her come all the ingredients and all the agencies by which Krishna can enjoy, right? Krishna's joy is receiving the service, and Radhika's joy is in giving the service, right? But the idea is that in this world, maybe the giver of the service is exploited, right? It's hard to find unconditional, selfless love in this world. We absolutely require reciprocation to motivate us, right? But on the spiritual plane, that reciprocation is natural and complete. So there is no inequality, and neither Radha or Krishna could exist without each other. Remember, we used the word moiety, right? They're two halves of the same complete whole. So I'm just going to reread the last part of what we ended with yesterday because it leads into the rest of what we have to finish. This is part 2 of this article by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada that appeared in The Harmonist in 1932 and was republished in 1998 in Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaj's Rays of the Harmonist. So the individual soul, the jiva, is a feminine entity by her proper nature. This is so because all entities, except the divinity, are subservients. The singularity of the predominating absolute has to be recognized without reservation. The singularity, in other words, the identity of Krishna as the enjoyer is one. He expands himself into many other Vishnu Tattva forms, but they are all he. In his, he can take multiple forms, but it's only Vishnu Tattva that is the actual receiver of service, right? So he says the singularity of the predominating absolute has to be recognized without reservation, must be recognized. And we discussed that at some length yesterday. There is, however, an infinity of divine personalities. But all divine personalities are fully divine. None of them have got any master, right? These expansions. The milkmaids of Braj are the expanded forms of Sri Radhika and identical with her. But the jiva does not belong to the category of the associated constituent counter wholes of Sri Radhika. Wholes, WHOLES, right? So Radhika has an entire group of gopis in the spiritual world that are her kaya vyuha, or directly expanded from her own transcendental form. And the Jaiva Dharma describes this, that when you take the various moods of Radhika, the left wing mood, right wing mood, and then all the sub-moods that are there in her Ashtasakis, and you keep combining them in different ways, you ultimately get 360 major divisions of different kinds of gopis. And those divisions are based on, they all represent particular qualities of Radhika's own moods of service. Radhika contains all the different varieties of mood and emotion that can be applied in service to Sri Krishna. And so only Radhika herself can fully satisfy Krishna, but she expands herself into these different forms in order that Krishna may taste very specifically each of these different moods. I don't know if I can give an example, but just to give this very gross example, when we grew up in New York, there was an ice cream place called Jan's, Jan''. They had two. I think one was in Brooklyn, one was in Oceanside, Long Island. And they had this speciality. It was called the kitchen sink. Kitchen sink in America means everything, right? And so it had everything on their menu, every flavor of ice cream, every topping, all the whipped cream, everything in one thing, the kitchen sink. No one person could finish it, but it was complete. So you could order it and share it with people, and you could taste everything, right? But maybe you didn't want to taste everything. Maybe you just wanted vanilla. Maybe you just wanted chocolate. Maybe you wanted vanilla with chocolate cream. Maybe you wanted it with nuts and bananas and something else. All the combinations were available. Everything was there, right? Or maybe you wanted it ordered separately because you didn't want the whole thing. You didn't want all the taste at that time. You wanted to taste something very specific. Radhika, as the complete and perfect counterpart to Sri Krishna, can expand herself in all of these ways. And even though there are 360 major divisions, there are infinite numbers of her expanded gopis, as we understand when we hear about Rasa Leela. But that's all to accommodate and provide Krishna with infinite varieties of taste, of service. Now, what about us? He says, but the jiva does not belong to the category of the associated constituent counterholes of Sri Radhika. We're not her kaya vyuha, we're not the nitya siddha expansions of her form. The jiva soul belongs to the decentralized plane of manifestations. Shiva is the divine center of the principle of this decentralized existence. Shiva is consorted for this purpose with Mahamaya. Shiva and Mahamaya are closely connected with the jiva. But the connection of the jiva with Shiva and Mahamaya is not identical with his connection with Sri Krishna and Sri Radhika. The connection of the jiva with Shiva and Mahamaya is established only when he is disassociated from the conscious service of Sri Sri Radha Krishna. So, we described this yesterday, but just briefly. The decentralized plane of manifestation. That's very, could be puzzling choice of words, right? But Krishna is the center of everything, right? So the decentralized plane of manifestation means that place where the jivas are existing, where Krishna is not the center of their existence, right? Not the center of their life. Instead, the special, you could say transformed form of Sri Krishna and Radhika, Shiva and Mahamaya, but Krishna himself never transforms. The Supreme Absolute cannot transform, but Shiva is a special agent who is created by the combination. He's an aspect of the Purusha avatar of Mahavishnu who has the desire to create, but in order to complete and be the agent of that in the material world, Vishnu never comes into contact with the material world. So he has a special agent of Lord Shiva or Shambhu, who is we'll use the word transformed, but he is a combination of that, self-identifying as a Purusha, but he also combines elements of the Jiva Shakti, the Ladini Shakti, Tamagun, right? A number of different elements combined so that Shiva can touch and interact with the material nature and complete the functions of creation. Because in order for creation to be performed, the material energy, which is non-living and dormant, has to be energized. And it has to be energized by the desire of the Lord. The Lord's desire to create in the spiritual world manifests itself through the power of his Shakti and all the different planets, all the different forms, all the different environments of the different dhams, right? But the material energy, that also has to be energized, and Shiva carries that desire. He is the reflected glance of Mahavishnu, semblance of his glance, semblance of his creative desire. So the creative desire then goes towards the material energy, and he carries the living entities with him. And then just as a male impregnates a woman with the living entity in the form of his semen, and she is the egg is not living, but it has the potentiality, and when the living entity and the egg unite, then all of a sudden this amazing thing begins to develop. So when Shiva carries the living entities, and by the time factor inspires Mahamaya, with that same desire, then she takes that, then it becomes her desire, because Krishna's desire is Radhika's desire, right? And so Shiva carries the desire for creation, gives it to Mahamaya. She becomes filled with that desire, and she becomes the energizing, or the energetic, the energy by which the creation takes place. And by the influence of time, the three modes of material nature manifest Mahatattva, and step by step, all of the different elements of material nature, the objects of the senses, the sense organs, all the potentiality and ingredients for creation are formed by that. Right? So that's Shiva's role. He represents Mahavishnu and Ramadevi in the material world. And so people in this world, they worship Lord Shiva and Mahamaya as the supreme Lord and the supreme goddess, right? But they're reflections of Radha and Krishna. And they're servants of Radha and Krishna. Vaishnavana Shambhu. Lord Shiva self-identifies as a servant of the Lord. Actually, he's such a servant that he's empowered with this capacity for creation. But he also has many tasks which are not so enviable, as does Mahamaya, right? They're tasked with creating the prison. Durga, another name for Mahamaya, means prison. So they're tasked with creating this prison for the, imprisonment of all us living entities. So that's their role. Saraswati Prabhupada says, neither Shiva nor Mahamaya can give the jiva the service of Sri Sri Radha Krishna. On the contrary, their function is to delude the jiva into desiring certain covetable things of this world for his own advantage. Right? So when the living entity is thrown into this world because of their neglect of the Lord, two things: the potency of throwing puts them in there, and then the potency of covering, where we are entrapped by false ego, which then, instead of the natural expression of love going toward the central point, the Lord himself, the idea of service and enjoyment turns inward towards the jiva itself. And then, because one is covered by a material body, one then begins from that time on to begin to think that my purpose and my enjoyment is always based on the body that I have. And that's a very unfortunate condition, as we all experience. Right? So, Shiva is not independent of Krishna. Shiva is a divine person. In this sense, Krishna and Shiva are identical. Both are male, but Shiva is a functionary, and in this office is associated with the deluding energy of Krishna. Sri Krishna never consorts with his deluding potency. The divinity of Shiva is adulterated with non-divinity, whereas Sri Krishna is eternally adulterated by Maya. The service of Shiva and Mahamaya is not only incompatible with the service of Sri Sri Radha Krishna, it also implies aversion to the service of all divine personalities who are uncontaminated by association with Maya. The different avatars of Vishnu cannot also be worshipped by any mundane reference. So Shiva is also a transcendental personality, a great devotee of the Lord, but what he means by this, the service of Shiva is incompatible with the service of Vishnu. That means if you're serving Lord Shiva out of separate interest, you're serving for material benefit. Otherwise, Lord Shiva has his own sampradaya, right? His own sampradaya. But that sampradaya is to give spiritual instruction and liberation to the spiritual liberation to the jivas. So in that case, though, you're not serving Shiva, except you're serving him as the guru, right? In that function, we can serve, right? But he means, in this case, he's not the ultimate object of service, but he becomes a conduit for service to the Lord. So when he says service to Shiva and Mahamaya, that kind of service in the material sphere is actually self-interested service. Lord Shiva is very easily pleased, and he gives material benedictions very freely for people that want that, because that's his task, right? And the same with Mahamaya. But because people of this material world come in all levels of conditioning, and some are very gross and absorbed in tamagun in terrible ways, they'll worship Lord Shiva and Parvati in ghastly ways to gain their pleasure. And so Parvati also has different expansions which will accept that. But what do they get? They get temporary material results and then ghastly reaction. In South India, you can become acquainted with tantrics, dark tantrics, who worship Lord Shiva and who worship the grosser forms of Mahamaya. And these tantrics can become very powerful. And then they make disciples, right? And ultimately, every tantric, they're ultimately trying to take over the position of their own guru, right? And these gurus who teach these black arts, they accumulate so much ghastly karma that at the end of their life, invariably they suffer horrible, horrible deaths, right? It's some of the things that you read about, hear about, are horrifying, right? But because they're under illusion, they don't think that far ahead. And oftentimes they are ended by the influence of their own disciples, who after some time are ended by their disciples. It's very dark, very dark. They do so many terrible things, human sacrifice, cannibalism, drinking blood. But those practices now are actually spread throughout the Western world as well. There are many people who practice this. Many powerful people are engaged in these kinds of rites and rituals. You'd never know it. They disguise themselves and hide it. But sometimes it comes out. It's horrifying. So, all misunderstanding regarding the nature of the worship of Sri Sri Radha Krishna is traceable to different degrees of willing affinity with the various concerns of this mundane plane. The so-called worship of Sri Sri Radha Krishna that is unfortunately practiced nowadays on such a large scale by the different sects of philanthropists in this country is a greater offense to the feet of Sri Sri Radha Krishna than even the open hostility of the worshippers of Shiva and Mahamaya. The real worship of the milkmaids of Braj is located on the highest plane of spiritual service, which transcends all conceptions of mundane worship that are put into the brains of conditional souls by Shiva and Mahamaya. Right. The first sentence, all misunderstanding regarding the nature of the worship of Sri Sri Radha Krishna is traceable to different degrees of willing affinity with the various concerns of this mundane plane. Many things to be drawn from that statement. In our practice and our bhakti, according to the degree by which we're covered by our own anarthas, right, the degree of willing affinity with the various concerns of the mundane plane. That means how much attachment do you have? How much separate interest do you have? How much anyabhilash do you have, right? Which degrades your service. Oh, I'll serve because I like doing this, but I don't want to do that. I'm only going to serve this amount of time because, whatever. You can give so many reasons for that. And if you catalog all the different kinds of separate interests, examine them in your own life, you can see, otherwise we'd be engaged full time, happily, right? But we have separate interests. So in that regard, our own worship is impeded. But also, in a more unfortunate sense, for people that are more deluded and haven't willingly tried to enter into genuine service of Radha and Krishna, and are hearing from so many unauthorized sources, they consider themselves worshippers of Radha Krishna, but they apply so many mundane conceptions to them and are seeking only mundane results. And they'll do things like take ayahuasca and other intoxicants, psychoactive substances, and think that they're experiencing life on some higher plane, some spiritual plane, right? All these varying degrees of prakriti sahaja, right? Enjoying, but materially, but speaking as if it's spiritual, right? When Mahaprabhu and Nityananda were going to visit Advaitacharya one time, they were passing the house of a Dari sannyasi, right? And the man invited them in. Oh, come in, come in, come in. And he was hosting them. And he was living with his wife, or a lady, dressed like a sannyasi. And Nityananda was fully conversant with all this. He was dressed like a sannyasi at that point. And Mahaprabhu, he was still a grihastha. And then the man was talking with them, and he was charmed by the beauty and qualities of Nityananda and Mahaprabhu. And then he was so happy, he said, now, would you like some Ananda? Let us have some Ananda together. Now, for us, what does that mean, Harinam Ananda, let's chant together, let's worship the deity, let's do some kind of seva. But for him, it meant, would you like some wine? He wanted to give them wine. And Mahaprabhu, obviously he knew everything, but he's pretending to be innocent. But Nityananda immediately knew what was going on. Hey, this guy's a rascal. We have to get out of here. And posing like a sannyasi, living with a woman, accepting the respect and service of village people, always a sannyasi. The woman, oh, no harm, he's detached, He's just accepting her service to purify her, or whatever. There's so many ways you can so-called excuse that. But then what's the Ananda? His version of Ananda, wine, right? And so many. You go around the country and you go to different communities and you see so many people who can't shake that, right? But as long as you are addicted to the intoxicants, you may be chanting very happily, right? But you're not going to even get a little taste of the real thing because it's covered. It's complete abhas, complete semblance, but not even an innocent semblance. There's two kinds of semblance. There's chaya bhakti abhas, right, which is a shadow of bhakti. A shadow is connected to the real thing. A shadow like of a tree, it's connected to the tree. So it's not really a representation of the tree except in the most minimal way, but it's connected, and it's a start, right? It may lead you to the tree, follow the shadow. But there's the other kind, which is pratibimba, which is a reflection. Like if you look in the sky and see the sun, and then you see it in a body of water, looks like the sun. It might be very bright and attractive, but it has no connection with the sun at all. And that is the other kind, where people appear to be practicing the limbs of bhakti, but so many misconceptions of the purpose, of the goal, of the nature of the holy name, of everything, and they get no benefit. Actually, their chanting, especially if they're impersonalist, is actually aparad and sends them further away from the reality. Which is why we are enjoined not to mix in the company. Right now, we're seeing waves and waves of all of these mixed groups arising. And Malini probably sees them more than anybody because she's going here and there and everywhere. The Bhakti Fest, the Kirtan Festival. I just saw one advertised in Hawaii. Very opulent, very attractive, all these well-known kirtaniyas, right? I won't mention any names. Come and enjoy, but you're going to have to spend $1,000 a day to do it. But you're going to be feted and fed, and everyone's going to feel so happy. We're all so glorious. But you're not going to get any spiritual benefit, right? What to speak of them, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Vrindavan Das Thakur speak very strongly about even if you are practicing bhakti, but then you fall into the realm of offense, especially offense to a pure devotee, then you may even be continuing to practice the limbs of bhakti externally. You may be chanting regularly, even following all the rules and regulations. You may be very learned, right? You may be in the topmost ashram. You may belong to the topmost sampradaya. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, all external, all show useless, no benefit, if you're an offender to pure devotees. And Vrindavan Das Thakur says that you may have a collection of these persons, all of that higher status, all sannyasis, all top sampradaya, all doing seva in so many apparently wonderful ways, chanting, dressed in the cloth. He says no better than assembly of drunkards. That's how serious aparad is. So, okay, I won't offend pure devotees. I'll only offend my god brothers and god sisters because they're not pure devotees, right? No harm. No. Even if there were no harm, and there is, there is, the worst harm is to Mahabhagavats. There is a progression, but even jiva aparad. If you read Bhajan Rahasya, Bhaktivinoda Thakur describing all the anarthas and aparads, even jiva aparad. And what's the danger of that? Arguing, even with ordinary people, fighting and arguing with them, and then insulting and condemning them. You're cultivating a particular mentality. You're allowing the mind to be dirty like that, and that will spill over into your bhakti, right? So that you start, it'll just come out. If you're used to, stupid karmi, this guy, that guy, this politician, that guy, it can't go on Facebook anymore because all my god brothers and god sisters are all, not all, some, a few, a small handful. Just seems like that. They're all criticizing. I just saw one today, dear friend, known him forever, writing about some politician that he just hates. And then this whole long thing, I just closed it. I always open it hoping I'm going to get some little nectar, but it's increasingly unavailable. And I thought, oh, God, why spend your time like that? It's just the most useless waste of time, and it creates a mindset. And then if you're criticizing them, then you talk about different devotees. Oh, they're not in our group. Oh, the way he's preaching. Oh, what he's saying. You don't understand bhakti. What is your qualification to criticize? If you don't agree with somebody, or if they're not practicing the way you would like to practice, or they don't do Mangalartik like you do, or whatever it is, then just try to see the Vaishnavata. Whatever degree of Vaishnava qualities and practice you see, honor that. Look for that. Look for the honey, right? And if there's something else and you don't understand or you find some objection, just fold hands, offer obeisance from a distance, don't be involved. Don't allow your bhakti to get consumed in these things. This is why Prahlad Maharaj was so disturbed with the teachings of Sanda and Amarka, because it's all based on friends and enemies. And friends and enemies are material constructs in this world, right? Someone who's favorable for my sense gratification, unfavorable for my sense gratification. That's why in 7th canto, it's described that Krishna has no friends and enemies in this world. He may appear to be favorable to the demigods or unfavorable to the demons. Everything he does is favorable, done out of love for every living entity. Even he kills demons in order to purify them, right? Puts them under difficulty in order to make them reflective, right? That's what this world is for. You're punished to make you reflective. Why am I here? What have I done? Why did I do this? Oh, look at the result. Right? And he interacts in a wonderful, loving way with the devotees because that's an ornament, Bhaktavatsalya, right? He has love for his devotees, and when they express their love for him, who would not reciprocate like that, right? So this mundane plane we have to be very clear not to mix our bhakti with those who are simply imitating it, but have very different conceptions, because they're not hearing from appropriate authority. They're just grabbing what they like and using it for their own purposes. Like Vasudeva Pondraka, right? The one who lived in Kashi, who took on 4 arms, and said that I am God, right? And when Krishna saw him, and he was proclaiming everywhere, demanding worship, and when Krishna saw him, he simply laughed. That was so hilarious, then he cut off his head. Mercy, though, because if he'd lived his whole life doing that, he would have gone to some horrible hell. Instead, he got liberation. So, the subject of divine amour must be approached with the attitude of confidential submission. There is the bond of love between Sri Krishna and Sri Radhika. There is an agency who brings about the union of the divine pair. The intermediary possesses a personality that is connected with both by the relationship of identity. All this is logically necessary. What is the agency? It's her friends. It's his friends. This is why she expands in so many ways, because love involves meeting and separation. Her friends are the agency of meeting and separation. They assist her in both. This is the divine identity of Manjaris. Her direct servants, but especially the Manjaris, right? To the above is added the stigma of unlawful love as a paramour. Now he's going to explain this. In the worldly sense, it's a stigma, it's abominable. It's still a stigma in the spiritual realm, but in order to add to the flavor and the joy of getting past and around the rules and regulations to meet despite so many obstacles, it makes it more tasty. Right? Just like somehow or other, if you steal prasadam, some maha that you're not supposed to have, this is for later for everybody, but you want it so badly you contrive some way to steal it, it becomes even more relishable. Because you've overcome so many obstacles to get it, right? If they just give it to you, all right, I'm getting my maha every day, But if you have to do so many things to get it, it's a stigma, but it's very relishable for you. Krishna stole, right? To the above is added the stigma of unlawful love as a paramour. Sri Radhika loves Krishna in defiance of all sumptuary principles of mundane loving intercourse. Right? All the rules and regulations, the morality that governs us in this world, they live by those same codes in Braj, or they exist, those codes, but they only exist as obstacles to enhance the loving affairs. That's why it's there. That's why Jatila is always criticizing Radhika and not allowing her to meet with Krishna. Jatila actually has such love for Radhika. Otherwise, she could never be her mother-in-law. She loves her. So all of her actions are actually done out of love for Radha and her reputation and everything. And if you ever read the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Chamatkara Chandrika, you'll see that out of all the amazing times that Radha and Krishna are brought together, overcoming an obstacle, Jatila has a hand in some of the most amazing unions. It says the agents of union. Jatila brings them together in the presence of all of their sakis in her own house and demands that they go upstairs and spend the night together in embracing each other and sharing food. But she doesn't know it's Krishna, but she's done it, right? So anyway, one day we'll have to read out loud that, or you can listen to it. You can get the audio book from Chaitanya Maharaj. It's so delightful, and then you look at Jatila in a completely different way from then on, So they have this unlawful love defying all the mundane loving principles, right? This is not accidental but deliberate. It is this characteristic of the function that bears a distant analogy to the illicit love of a paramour. Sri Radhika habitually sacrifices and makes it a point to sacrifice every other interest to her love for Sri Krishna. This is also the characteristic of the loving service of the milkmaids of Braj, among whom Sri Radhika is the foremost. And if you want to get a sense of what that is, you read this Gopal Champu, and you read about the Katyani Vrat, and when the young gopis, unmarried gopis, Krishna finally comes to fulfill the purpose of their vow, to agree to become their husband, he puts them through this trial, which is so extraordinary. And to mundane vision, it's what? What is he doing? He makes them emerge from the water completely unclothed and raise their hands before him, abandoning absolutely every shred of chastity, right? But he says, before they have to make that final step, he says, I want to become submissive to you, so please do this. He's saying, in other words, if you surrender completely to me, I will become completely submissive to you. I will then become controlled by your completely pure and unfettered love. That's what he's telling them. And that's what we're aspiring for, pure, unfettered love. Not aspiring for some mundane sense of amour, but as ladies with Krishna or the perverted reflection of it. We're aspiring for unfettered, completely unconditional, selfless love. Because that results in the purest reciprocation as well. What is reciprocation? The reciprocation is the degree to which you experience and taste Ladini Shakti, the pleasure potency. When you become one of Radhika's own, you're sharing her own pure love and emotions. And that was expressed in this. It says, Radhika sacrifices everything more than everyone else. And so Chaitanya Charitamrita says the heart of every living entity is like a mirror. And Krishna shines in that mirror according to the nature of your heart. And it says, Sri Krishna's beauty and quality shine more supremely and purely in the heart of Radhika than any other. Right? She sees him more completely and more purely. And the gopis, by extension. When Krishna finally appears after disappearing again in the Rasa Leela, impelled by their prayers in the Gopi Geet, by their expressions of unparalleled expressions of love, how's it described? He appeared in a form so beautiful, so unique, it had never been seen before. And it couldn't be seen by anyone but those who possessed that most extraordinary love. Right? So, it is a characteristic of, it is a characteristic of the function that bears a distant analogy to the illicit love of a paramour. Sri Radhika habitually sacrifices and makes it a point to sacrifice every other interest to her love for Sri Krishna. This is also the characteristic of the loving service of the milkmaids of Braj, among whom Sri Radhika is the foremost, among whom our Guru Parampara are coming to deliver this to us. The relationship to a paramour is a most unfortunate analogy from the point of view of the moral people of this world. No religious creed of this world gives proper countenance to illicit mundane love. The sanctity of the tie of wedlock is also universally regarded as the seal and crown of the civilized intimacy between the sexes. Right. In this world, you have to be moral. Relationship between men and women has to be sanctioned by marriage, right? And then that's approved, right? Free sexual love is likewise universally denounced as a sign of unreclaimed animality. We have no idea of contradicting these undoubtedly proper views in regard to the legitimate form of sexual relationship of all civilized societies. But although it may sound paradoxical, it is nevertheless true that what is most unwholesome in this world is analogously the most wholesome in the realm of the absolute. Everything there being perfect. There is no such institution as the conventional marriage in the spiritual realm of Krishna. The milkmaids of Braj are absolutely free from all taint of sensuousness. They possess spiritual bodies, which are so formed as to be capable of being fully used in the exclusive service of Sri Krishna. Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilanam, right? Krishnanu Shilanam, right? All for Krishna, exclusively for Krishna, and with a completely selfless mood, only for the pleasure or benefit of Krishna, right? And this transgression of morality, it's a construct. Even the identity of the husbands is a construct to create a drama, a play. The Dham is a gigantic stage of love play, and every ingredient in it, from the scenery, right, the trees, the groves, the rivers, the homes, the different dramatic players, it's all meant to enhance the love play between Radha and Krishna, right? And so, how can these gopis be considered impure? They're expansions of Radhika. They're created only for the pleasure of Krishna. They're not created or bound by any of the other setups on the stage. There are no husbands. They're just props to create obstacles to enhance the eagerness and joy of meeting, right? To provide the counterpart to meeting, separation, and to create all kinds of different emotional transformations, right? The mother-in-law, I'm staying here, you have to stay in the house, you can't go. I'm going, no, you can't go, right? Brothers, friends, family, even babies at one point. All of this is to be given up, and it also shows to the worldly minded something special about that love. And when you read closely, you have to read not just the stories conveyed in the scripture, but the commentary and the revelation of the acharyas to help us understand that completely, right? How it's all selfless. And even expressions of anger, it's to enhance the moods of Krishna. He likes to be taunted. He likes to be teased. He likes to be told he can't do this so that he'll prove that he can, right? And the gopis, they'll say it just so that they can see him do it, right? The greater the obstacle, the more happiness it creates, right? So it's all completely different, right? That's why this is called the reflection, perverted reflection of the spiritual realm. The real difficulty in the way of our realization of the nature of transcendental amour is that we do not have the necessary basic conception of the nature of the spiritual body itself. We are thus under the necessity of the physical body to the relationships of pure souls who are not encumbered by the grossness and limitations of the defective physical coils. Coils means like your body, right? The idea of grossness, immorality, etc. apply only to the mundane plane. The spiritual personality of the spiritual milkmaids of transcendental Braj must be realized instead of being criticized by the admittedly inadequate resources of a mundane experience. In other words, you can't transpose mundane conceptions, mundane morality, mundane sense of right and wrong from this plane onto the pure, exalted spiritual plane. This plane wasn't created by Krishna to constrain him. It was created to give us a field for independent enjoyment and gradual purification to the spiritual realm. Krishna's not controlled by, he's the master of all of this. This is his energy, and it's not meant for him He's not a prisoner, right? He's the king. King creates it for the benefit of the subject. Chanakya Pandit says this. He says the king shows mercy to his citizens by giving them punishment. That means you need to be corrected, right? Parents will do that out of love. But they're not constrained by the same rules and regulations. Parents don't have to go to bed when the kids go to bed. Parents don't have to accept the limits that they impose on their children. The fact that a considerable number of persons have actually been misled in trying to follow the preachers of the religion of unconventional spiritual amour cannot properly be laid at the door of the religion itself. Just because others misunderstand it and find fault with it, that's their illusion. It's not Radha and Krishna's fault that you misunderstood all this. It's not Shukadeva Goswami's fault. They're giving this to you for your benefit. If you misuse it, well, like a knife, right? Scalpel. You can use it to heal somebody, like a doctor, or you can use it to kill somebody or cause them harm. If you're ignorant and degraded, you'll misuse that thing. Unfortunately, there have been many pseudo-preachers of religion who make use of the teachings of the Bhagavat for condoning and encouraging illicit carnality. Yes. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but I've heard many examples of preachers, sometimes even associated with, our sampradayas, going around, men preachers saying, yes, in order to really enter deeply in understanding parakya, mood of Radha and Krishna, we also have to do this. And if we have a parakya relationship, then we can really understand Radha and Krishna. And don't tell anybody, though. And these people, there have been men who have had relationships with multiple ladies by that preaching. You'd say, what? Come on. It's true. Lots of examples of that. I know many, many, many. Right? Abominable. But the cheater and the cheated, they go hand in hand. I mean, you have to go through that, I guess, at some point where you become beguiled by that. Oh, there's a legitimate way that we can have sex and we won't have to feel guilty. We won't tell anybody. Okay. Because as long as we have these coverings and these anartas, these things are going to be tested. We're going to be given opportunities, right? So, condoning and encouraging illicit carnality. These preachers are no doubt a great nuisance and come under the penal clauses of the civil law for safeguarding decency and morality. It's not just like the Bhikshana, what is that guy's name, the Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, chastised and put in jail? He was doing this, claiming to be Krishna himself and engaging in rasa lila with the wives of many wealthy people. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur had him arrested, and a whole story, but that kind of thing. But it appears in more subtle ways also. But these pseudo-teachers do also represent a real existing popular demand for the pernicious doctrines which they spread among the people. The penal clauses of the civil law cannot reach the inner disposition of the people. It will not do to simply ignore this very deplorable state of affairs, nor to allow the growth of the tendency. In a democratic and rationalistic age, it becomes necessary to provide the right direction for a natural aptitude by means of an intensive counter-propaganda. In other words, laws are not enough to constrain the immoral propensities of people, right? You have to educate them. You have to cut the jungles of this misconception. Otherwise, they won't understand or appreciate the laws of morality, which is obvious when you look at today's society and culture leaders. Who are the culture leaders? They're Hollywood actors and actresses who are completely promiscuous in every way, and they're held up as shining examples of, they're living their true life, They've got these catchphrases. What was that there? Boss girls, boss guys, living their real life. I mean, just acknowledging and encouraging as much sense gratification as you can. And they spread that everywhere. It's a terrible thing. The only thing that's going to correct it is our counter-propaganda and offering something more beguiling, more wonderful. Because even the wealthiest people, ultimately, they reach a limit. They find, I've got so much money, I've got so many houses, I've been married so many times. The intelligent person at one point will think, oh, God, is this all there is to life? You know? Isn't there more? I just got a spurt of my realization of that. I can't tell it now. I've got to finish this. We're getting late. It's pretty funny, though. Oh, God! And then 2 months later, I was living in a temple. All the current religions are practically silent about this particular subject, but it has not been rendered unimportant by being ignored by the religionists. The preventive and discouraging methods do not offer any positive cure and have, as a matter of fact, been found to be practically useless. Right? So churches, all they can do is tell you what not to do. They can't tell you what to do. The only thing you can do to overcome this is positive service, submissive service, under the guide of the perfected, submissive maidservants in our line, Srimati Radhika and her associates, right? Or other sampradayas, something to be engaged appropriately. Unless you get a higher taste. What is it? What is that? That'll come to me later. But, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that one who tries to renounce the object of senses prematurely won't be able to do it. But you can do it by experiencing a higher taste, right? Higher taste. What is that verse? Oh, God. Got to get back to those verses. What is it? Param drishta nivartate. That's the higher taste. Param drishta nivartate. Anyway. The truth is that there is a real plane for the wholesome exercise of the amorous disposition that is part and parcel of our soul. It is necessary to realize the nature of this plane in order to be relieved of our harmful errors in regard to sexual relationship. Some sort of conviction must precede the actual adoption of any proposed method. The Gaudiya mission proposes to place before all persons the point of view of Lord Chaitanya, which is also in conformity with the teachings of all bona fide religions. The personality of Sri Radhika supplies the solution of this eternal problem. Sri Rupa has offered the detailed exposition of the subject in his monumental works. Sri Jiva has explained the real meaning of those works. The Gaudiya mission is trying to make available to the present generation the interpretations of the Acharya of the amorous service of the divinity. So that article, in its entirety, 1932, from the Harmonist, in the issue 2 of the Rays of the Harmonist, Kartik 1997. What's that?
Is that by Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. To tell by the language.
I don't know, it sounded like Swami Prabhupada a little bit too, so I was...
Well, yes, and Bhaktivedanta Keshava, they all sound like that, but his own special turns of phrase are quite unique. Srila Prabhupada had to dumb it down for us a little bit, using more accessible language. There's hardly a time when I read something from Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada that I don't have to look up a couple of words. How is he using this? What does he mean? Anyway, so we'll stop there. And he began, that whole thing was an exposition on the nature of Srimati Radharani, her identity and her loving relationship with Krishna, and the Tattva of Radhika as the supreme energy, and the relationship of the supreme energy to the supreme energetic, and how the spiritual world has to be understood philosophically in order to appreciate the activities themselves, because without the philosophical underpinnings, you're going to see those activities and make them analogous to our own activities in this world. We'll take the divine to be non-different from the mundane, and then instead of serving the divine, we imitate the divine. That's what we've been doing since time immemorial, right? In our own, gross and imperfect fashion. But by accessing and trying to enter into that realm, we can begin to actually taste and become immersed step by step, right? But even in the beginning, even in the most beginning stage of bhakti, there's a special kind of joy and a special kind of veracity that comes to the heart. Faith endowed with experience and strong philosophical underpinnings. Faith without philosophy, our Srila Prabhupada would say, is simply sentimental. And philosophy without genuine religious experience is confined to the realm of mental speculation. So the two are intertwined. All right, so I have to stop here. Went a little long, sorry. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Gurudev, all glories to all the assembled devotees. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Prabhupada Thakur. Thank you. Haribol.